It's showtime. Good afternoon and welcome back to another session on my Declassified Caribbean News and Network channel, News and Commentary. And today we're going to be looking at the topic Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. Now, Trinidad and Tobago was once regarded as one of the Caribbean's strongest economies. Today, many citizens are asking difficult questions about crime, economic growth, and the country's regional direction. Is Trinidad simply going through a difficult period, or is it facing a broader national crisis? This afternoon or this evening, we'll examine the evidence. Now, we are looking at the topic Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. Now, in the 1950s to 1970s, the oil economy emerges in Trinidad. Oil had been produced commercially since the early 1900s, but the economy expanded rapidly after World War II. The 1973 and 1979 oil price shocks created an enormous windfall. Under Prime Minister Dr. Eric Williams, government revenues surged, allowing significant investment in education, roads, healthcare, housing, and state enterprises. Trinidad became one of the wealthiest countries in the English-speaking Caribbean. Now, we had a 1980s, they had boom. The boom ends in 1980s. When oil prices collapsed in the mid-1980s, government revenue fell sharply. The country entered recession, unemployment rose, and Trinidad sought assistance from international financial institutions while implementing economic reforms. Now, throughout the 1990s to 2000s, natural gas drives a second boom. Rather than relying on crude oil, Trinidad and Tobago developed its abundant offshore natural gas reserves. It became one of the world's leading exporters of liquefied natural gas, that's LNG. Major petrochemical industries expanded, producing methanol, ammonia, fertilizers, and other industrial products. During the 2000s, high global energy prices generated another period of prosperity. Why has the model become more difficult? Several factors have changed over the past decade. Maturing gas fields. Some major fields have produced less over time, reducing output. Delays in new projects bringing new gas fields online has taken longer than expected. Greater global competition. The United States became one of the world's largest oil and natural gas producers, especially after the shale revolution, increasing LNG exports and competition in international markets. Energy transition. Many countries are investing in renewable energy and lower carbon technologies, affecting long-term demand expectations for fossil fuels. Energy remains the backbone of Trinidad and Tobago's economy, but the industry operates in a more competitive global environment than it did during the 1970s or 2000s. The diversification challenge. Economists have discussed diversification for decades, but progress has been uneven. Areas often identified for growth include manufacturing for export, financial and business services, information technology and digital industries. Tourism through Trinidad's model differs from islands such as Barbados and Jamaica. Agriculture and food processing to reduce food imports. Creative industries, including music, film, and cultural exports. Many analysts argue that the economy remains heavily dependent on the performance of the energy sector, making it vulnerable to fluctuations in production and global commodity markets. Has Trinidad and Tobago waited too long to diversify its economy, or can the country still build a prosperous future beyond oil and gas? That's what we're about to explore in this afternoon's conversation. Now, we understand that Trinidad is now entering Mercosur. And for those of you who don't know, Mercosur is a South American market. We call it the Southern Common Market. It is South America's largest trading bloc. Its full members include Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Bolivia. And Bolivia's accession has recently been completed, while several other countries participate as associate members. For Trinidad and Tobago, the attraction is straightforward. The country needs new markets, new investments, and stronger economic links beyond its traditional partners. Now, what are the potential benefits if Trinidad and Tobago successfully enters Mercosur? Supporters argue that closer ties with Mercosur could give Trinidadian businesses access to a market of more than 270 million people, attract investment from South American companies, create opportunities to export manufactured goods, petrochemicals, and professional services, strengthen economic relations with Brazil, Latin America's largest economy, reduce dependence on a small domestic market and a relatively slow-growing CARICOM economy. For a country seeking diversification, these are significant potential advantages. Now, what are some of the challenges should it go fully into Mercosur? Critics point to several concerns. First, Trinidadian manufacturers could face much stronger competition from large producers in Brazil and Argentina. Second, Mercosur has its own trade rules and common external tariff. Aligning these commitments with CARICOM's trade arrangements can be complex and may require careful negotiation. Third, Trinidad has historically been one of the Caribbean's industrial leaders. If local industries are not competitive enough, greater market opening could increase imports more than exports. Can Trinidad belong to both? The key issue is whether Trinidad can deepen its relationship with Mercosur while remaining fully committed to CARICOM. In principle, countries can participate in multiple regional arrangements, but it requires ensuring that trade obligations are compatible and that commitments under one agreement do not conflict with those under another. For Trinidad, the challenge is strategic. CARICOM provides close regional ties, political cooperation, and a familiar market. Mercosur offers access to much larger economies and potentially greater commercial opportunities. Many analysts see these relationships as potentially complementary if managed carefully, while others worry that pursuing deeper integration with South America could complicate CARICOM trade policy or shift attention away from Caribbean regional integration. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves, should Trinidad and Tobago prioritize deeper integration with South America through Mercosur, or should it focus first on strengthening CARICOM? Can it successfully do both? These are some of the questions that we will be looking at in this afternoon's program. Now, let's begin with a video that I saw online and would like to share with you with this Mario Brown from the University of the West Indies giving his perspective. So let me add it to the stage and we listen to what he's saying there.
Tobago isn't a shortage of foreign exchange, and it isn't low investor confidence. It is the belief that the old economic model, the dependence on the energy sector, is going to make a comeback and that will move us forward. I am Mariano Brown, the Chief Executive Officer of the UWI Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. No economy is immune to economic shocks, but the Trinidad Tobago economy is anchored in energy market volatility. We are dependent on the international prices of the energy products that we export. So therefore, our rise is as steep as our decline. But our problem is not energy market volatility right now. Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector has been in steady decline for more than 2 decades. In the pre-war years, Trinidad supplied nearly 40% of the British Empire's oil. After independence in the 1970s, we produced around 240,000 barrels of oil per day. Today, that figure is down to about 54,000 barrels per day. Natural gas production has also fallen sharply. This trending downwards is owed to the steady depletion of mature fields. The real problem is that successive governments have failed to develop alternative export-driven models which generate necessary revenue to replace the energy sector as our mainstay. Whilst it has been true that non-energy revenues have been growing, our governments and our private sector have been waiting around expecting that projects like Manatee and Dragon will deliver the glory days and big pay packets. In a sense, we're like passengers waiting for a plane that has been taken off service. Like our heyday of oil and gas, we need to see similar or greater explosive growth in the export of local goods, services, tourism, and foreign investment to build on our energy foundations. Revenues from oil and gas have aided in the development of Trinidad and Tobago. But the real question that we now face is this a legacy that is holding us back? So what do you think? Are we stuck waiting for the old economy to come roaring back to life? Or is there an alternative? Let us know in the comments.
Okay, so we see that, Trinidad and Tobago, just like many of us in the Caribbean region, we tend to rely on what is, marketable, but we don't want to diversify our economies. Most of our Caribbean countries are not visionary, or leaders lack vision, and they go with what is the trend. For example, in Jamaica in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, bauxite was the thing, right? And afterwards, when bauxite was no longer the thing, the Jamaican economy, it tankered. So we are seeing now in Trinidad, gas, and oil and gas were the primary, or the foundation, the spine of the Trinidadian economy, but they did not diversify, right? And they did not develop the requisite technology to be able to do what they need to have done. So it's almost like we had king sugar, then we went to banana, then we went to oil and natural gas in the case of Trinidad, and without any vision, and that is what we're seeing now. So the end of the Trinidadian oil and gas boom could be right now final, because right now we're seeing where the United States is now an oil and gas independent country. So Trinidad does not have that market, that large market, which it used to have before. So it needs now to find another source. And what are they going to do? Because right now what we're seeing, people are talking about inviting foreign investment, direct foreign investment. But what happens when these guys come to your country? What they do, they come with the requisite tools, the technologies, and they do not invest in the country for the most part. They will make profit and they send their profits away. And that is what tourism should have taught us, which we have not yet fully learned our lessons. Right? And that is what we need to do. Now, the Trinidad economy is facing a lot of challenges, including, a very high rate of unemployment. People are suggesting that our unemployment rate stands at 4%, thereabout. But people are arguing that that is not true. What they're seeing on the ground, the realities on the ground suggest otherwise. And we have here an article, Facing Economic Karma, and this is what Ralph Maraj, and I think that he is the ambassador, the Trinidad ambassador to CARICOM, and it says that it is said our past sins catch up with us, that karma is inescapable. We see today in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. In a 2019 column, Wasting the Wind, I pointed out that one of the architects of the Point Lisa's industrial estate, the late Professor Ken Julian, said it was never the intention to export our natural gas as LNG, but to use it for petrochemical production, maximizing benefit, including economic transformation. But the plantation economy persisted. What did he say? The plantation economy, because ours is in the Caribbean plantation economies. But the plantation economy persisted into the 21st century in Trinidad and Tobago. We exported much of the raw material for foreign earnings and wild consumption, ignoring sustainability. And that's what we do. Whenever we find a market that generates lots of money, we are very visionless and we don't have ways of expanding and diversifying our economy, because the domestic elites, all they want is some temporary money in their pockets. And then they say, wow, we're doing well, so why should we build more? Now, sometimes we tend to blame white Americans, right? And we blame white people, the West, for our lack of progress. But a lot of times we also are involved because of our lack of vision. And without vision, the people perish. Something about people of color that is wrong with us. We don't have vision. Whenever we have lots of money now, we party and we have wonderful time, and we're not thinking about what might happen in the future. And this is what is happening to Trinidad and Tobago at the moment. When the oil and gas were booming, they were partying too much and wasting time rather than building a foundation that would have made them self-reliant. And I'm using the word self-reliant because that is important. We do not know how to be self-reliant. We like to complain about the West, but we depend on them too much. As a result of that, when we have good markets, when we're getting good markets in their market, we tend to now relax and think that everything is okay. And right now, everything is not okay. Now, listen to what he's saying here. Julian said we have better benefits from petrochemicals than from LNG. Indeed, the gas master plan revealed government's receipts for LNG are the best behind ammonia and methanol. Yet we continue to allocate 50% of our natural gas into LNG and 50% to petrochemicals, causing increasing curtailed gas supply to point leases since 2014, tarnishing the country's reputation for reliability and stemming foreign investment flows and threatening the future of the petrochemical sector. Today, karma is catching up. 2 months into this new administration's critical second year, the nation is facing the indefinite idling by Methanex Corporation of its Titan plant in Port Lisas, with a methanol capacity of 860,000 tons. President of the Coalition of Services Industries, Diane Joseph, says methanol remains a top-tier export. This would severely constrict foreign exchange inflows, exacerbating ongoing currency pressures. So we are seeing here where Trinidad and Tobago is facing economic crisis. And even though the elites would like us to believe that things are rosy and fine and dandy, because that's what they do, because that is what they want to give the illusion so that foreign investors can invest, they have to say what is not. And perhaps they are benefiting from the chaos. Perhaps they're benefiting from the lack of, jobs and resources, and they're becoming richer while the majority of Trinidadians are actually suffering. Now, the Daily Express carried a story, I think it was day before yesterday, more jobs. I think this is actually a letter to the editor, more jobs and urgent need. That is what they're calling for in Trinidad and Tobago. I listened to someone stating that in a matter of months, their place of employment would close its doors. So we're seeing many businesses in Trinidad and Tobago closing their doors, right? And when you see that, you know that economic hardships are actually looming, right? Make sure you're sharing the live and you're liking the live. This is a very important discussion for all Trinidadians and Caribbean citizens, because what I'm seeing here, for those of us who are Jamaicans and remember the 1990s of FinSac, I am seeing the exact playbook that happened during FinSac in the 1990s, and all the closures of these businesses, private businesses, local businesses, which will allow people to suffer. And then you have the tankering, the devaluation of the Jamaican currency, right? Which is worth nothing at the moment. Something like this is simply not good news, he's saying, because many businesses are closing down, even more so knowing the state of our economy. This has become a trend, he's saying, and includes long-standing businesses. Why? Is it not profitable for them to do business anymore in TNT? Unemployment has increased over the years and continues to get worse. Those who sit in the office and quote figures about unemployment in TNT are living in a dream world. They need to get out there and walk the streets and communities and get first-hand information. So we can listen to what we want to hear about the stats coming from the IMF and the World Bank and from these cozy offices in Trinidad, even from the Trinidadian Parliament. But is that true? No, it's not true, because the people who are actually suffering are the ones whose voices are being suppressed. How many of our children who have various institutions year after year cannot find employment? They are told to go into their own business. Are we seeing what is taking place out there in the business sector right now? It takes the thing called capital to start a small business. And with that, you must have money put aside for unexpected events. Last year, thousands of workers were sent home. How many? Thousands. This is happening in TNT. Thousands of workers were sent home with their hands empty. Many of them are still unemployed, and that includes single mothers. A message to all: our economy needs a good shakeup in a positive direction. Too many of our young people are seeking jobs and simply cannot find any type of employment. This is the reality. This is the reality, not the low unemployment that they are quoting to us, believing that we are stupid. It sounds good on paper, but it is not the reality. Anyone can talk, calling figures, but who can truly verify this? The truth is there as you speak to those on the streets and in the communities. And the serious unemployment situation is not helping our crime situation. And right now, Trinidad and Tobago stands as one of the most, it has the highest, one of the highest homicide rates in the entire world, right? Higher than that of Jamaica. Can you imagine that? It is now higher than that of Jamaica. Lack and poverty in any country can create negative behavior. What is the plan to create employment opportunities right now, short-term and long-term, considering all skills set? When poverty rises, that's not a good thing for any people. Just look at Haiti and what goes on there. We have to deal with not just the crime issue, but also the growing unemployment situation. And when you have that, the crime rate is going to increase and will get out of hand like it did in Jamaica. I see most people in two categories. Firstly, those who are crying out for more money owed to them. And secondly, those who are crying out because they have no money, simply because they are unemployed. Both need attention. Let us together make TNT a better place for all. For change is possible if we work together. But how can we work together if we are not hearing the truth? I've always said there's no unity if there's no truth. And what happens in the Caribbean region is that people, whether you go to Jamaica or Trinidad or Barbados, wherever you are, Caribbean citizens don't like to hear the truth. We don't like to hear the truth. We want to hear rosy figures like the unemployment rate is down, right? And we say that we quote what the politicians tell us to quote, coming from the IMF and the World Bank. And that makes us think that we are scholastic, that we are intellectual, that we know the reality, when we know we have family members, we have friends, we have colleagues who are suffering, but would rather quote from what comes from mainstream. When are we going to wake up? When are we going to see that very soon they're leading us into slavery? That's exactly what they're doing. And talk about slavery, there's a piece of news that is coming out of Jamaica today that speaks about they are treating us like slaves. I saw that in the Jamaica Observer this morning. Second Jamaican man transferred to Eswatini by U.S. likens TCN, which means Third Country National Program, to slave trade. Right? So they're making us into slaves again. Listen to what he's saying. Despite repeated assurances from the government that Jamaicans expelled from the United States would never be refused entry to their homeland, another Jamaican man has been shipped to the southern African state of Eswatini under America's Third Country Nationals Agreement. 64-year-old Junior Alves, a Christian pastor who has lived in the United States for the past 44 years, was among 11 people transported to Eswatini on Wednesday. He is the second Jamaican, I should say, sent to Eswatini by the U.S. in recent times under its TCN agreement with that country which pays approximately 5.1 million US dollars to accept them. Now, we're hearing lots of things coming out of different Caribbean countries. We spoke about Barbados yesterday, and we mentioned the fact that in Barbados, they're looking forward now to, to be sending African laborers to Barbados. So we're seeing where the Caribbean region is changing. And we're seeing that, life is not what it used to be. So many of us are looking forward that our governments are going to improve the lots of the economy when that's not what they're going to do. Things are going to get worse. They're going to continue now to, import cheaper laborers, and they are going to what? Replace us. They are going to replace us. And that is why they are fooling us, telling us that there are jobs when there are no jobs. And we've got to wake up as Caribbean citizens, but we are not willing to wake up. And that is something that continues to alarm me. Now, rethinking Trinidad and Tobago's labor market. This was an article that was written too. Despite a macroeconomic environment that has been characterized by slowing growth for over a decade. So Trinidad's growth has been slowed for over a decade. Trinidad and Tobago's labor market appears to have remained remarkably resilient. They always like to use this word resilient. And resilient does not mean strong or robust. Okay, I hope you understand that. It means that the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer. Something that you have to understand. That's a buzzword for the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer. So when you see resilient there and you think it means strong, healthy, you need to think the opposite. By both regional and international standards, the country's unemployment rate has generally remained low. Even though periods of weak energy production, several attempts at fiscal adjustment, and the deep macro shock of the COVID-19 pandemic, the headline unemployment rate has not suggested a labor market in crisis. Is that so? But let us look at what they're saying here. From an economic perspective, this situation is something puzzling. Following the 2006 to 2014 energy boom years, Trinidad and Tobago has experienced a prolonged economic slowdown lasting over a decade, including a sharp contraction during the pandemic. Nevertheless, unemployment did not rise in a way that fully matched the weakness in output. Based on data from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, that's the CBTT, average unemployment was recorded at 3.3 in 2015, peaked at 5.7% in 2020, and stood at 4.5% for 2025. Most recent quarterly data from the Central Statistical Office, that's the CSO, reported an unemployment rate of 4.3% in the fourth quarter of 2025. Now, is that true? How is this true when, the people on the ground are saying we can't find jobs, right? And we're seeing that businesses are closing down every day. Thousands are being laid off without money. And yet still, they're telling us that the unemployment rate in Trinidad stands at 4%. Are they telling us the truth, or are we being lied to? All right, I have some other videos. Let me take this from the stage and get to some more videos. I need to remove this and get to some more clippings that I had for you, just to give you some, remove from the studio here. I'm going to go for another video now, and we're going to look at another clipping so we can educate ourselves as to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so let me get that other clipping on the screen. Bear with me, please. Thank you. And this is, I think I want number 2. So I go to get this and have that on the thing. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the screen now. Okay.
Of all the ammonia that the United States imports. Fertilizer that is keeping American farms alive from Trinidad and Tobago gas on an estate that didn't exist 50 years ago. This is part 3 of explaining Trinidad and Tobago's oil and gas economy, and today we're going to talk about the Point Lisas industrial estate. Trinidad and Tobago had two choices: export the raw gas and let someone else profit, or add the value yourself. Eric Williams chose the second. Point Lisas, the Central West Coast. In 1970, this was the answer. Concept was simple: pipe gas in, strip the heavy components, and feed the rest to chemical plants on the estate. Gas plus heat plus a catalyst gives you ammonia. And ammonia gives you fertilizer. By 2022, Trinidad and Tobago was the largest net ammonia exporter. 7 plants, 5.67
Did I take it
billion
wrong thing?
tons
Sorry
of
about that.
annual capacity. Companies
All right, let me put it back to the screen.
man, all running on Trinidad gas. For the model to work, it needs abundant, cheap gas. And since 2010, Trinidad's gas supply has been declining. Plants now run on 80% capacity. October 2025, Nutrien shut all 4 of their ammonia plants. Unreliable gas supply, port fees, and dispute with the NEC was cited. Next also paused production on their plants. A contract ending in September 2026, they have publicly warned that they might be next leaving the country. NGC posted a $3.2 billion profit. The plants that was buying those gas are going dark. Point Lisas was built on abundant, cheap gas, and gas is thinning. So the cracks are showing in Point Lisas. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below on the Point Lisas industrial estate, and like and follow for part 4.
Okay, good. Very good. I think that was a good summary that he did. Let me remove this, and I'm going to show some other videos to let us see what is happening in Trinidad. Okay, because this is very important, because we're living in societies now in which we are being lied to right, left, and center, and we have to find a way to get the truth from people who are actually doing the research. All right, that's what we have to do. So let me put up another just to get our our thoughts together and ensure that we are not being deceived. Let me put this on the stage.
2026. CARICOM leaders gather in St. Kitts and Nevis. Part of the program is a private leaders retreat across the water in Nevis, a short boat ride. Trinidad and Tobago says its delegation was disinvited from the retreat. Its foreign minister, Sean Sobers, says the message came by WhatsApp the morning of the meeting. And at the retreat, Trinidad not in the room, the leaders make one of the biggest decisions the community could make: reappointing the Secretary General, Dr. Carla Bennett of Belize, to a second 5-year term. Trinidad's case: it was never on the official agenda, never discussed in plenary, a breach, they say, of Article 2024 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, the same treaty that those 4 men signed in 1973. And Trinidad says it wasn't alone. Antigua and Barbuda retreat either. CARICOM chairman says Barnett got the required majority and nobody was uninvited. St. Vincent Ralph Gonzalez goes on radio with his own version, including a now famous story about seasickness on that boat ride. Now look at this. 1973. CARICOM's first crisis. A member claiming a major decision was made illegally behind closed doors, outside the rules. 2026. CARICOM's worst crisis. A member claiming a major decision was made illegally behind closed doors, outside the rules. 53 years apart, the same exact fight, almost word for word. It escalates fast. Trinidad threatens its contribution to the Secretariat, and Trinidad is one of the biggest contributors. It starts skipping meetings. The leaders hold a 5-hour virtual session and agree not to redo the February decision. And then Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar makes it absolute. Trinidad recognizes Barnett only until the term ends in August 2026, not 1 day after. This is our final position. And if the community doesn't like it, expel us if you want. 64 years after, 1 from 10 leaves north. A Trinidadian Prime Minister is once again doing the arithmetic of walking away. Williams goes, speaking through the UNC government. This instinct doesn't belong to a party, it belongs to the country. But the Barnett fight is only half of 2026. Here's the other half, and this is where the articles become prophecy. While the ban
Okay, so we can see here that our respective Caribbean countries are not in any way, we are not a unified bloc, you know. So when they're meeting, you see them in St. Kitts and you see them in the last, where did they have the last meeting? They have the last meeting in St. Lucia, right? These people are not united and they're not looking for markets to improve our lives. What they're doing, the elites are actually consolidating their power and their wealth, but they're not there to look for wealth and to improve the lives of our citizens. And many times we're following CARICOM meetings and think that they're meeting because they want us to our lives to be better, but that is not what they're seeking to do. And that was a very good sort of synopsis of the fact that we as a region, as a bloc, we are not unified. So let's get together as people and begin to organize ourselves. Now, let me show you another clipping. Let me see here of what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago, because what is happening there is not a pretty image, okay? It's not good. Let's get now to another reality check.
Now, word on the ground is that Nestle is leaving because of NGC decision to raise gas prices. And all of this falls squarely on the back of the UNC government. Now, almost every morning when I pass in the Wallerfield area, there is a place we call the milk depot, where you would see farmers coming with their milk and selling it to Nestle. And I wonder what is going to happen to those farmers who sell their milk to Nestle. What is going to happen to those farmers? I don't understand. Those farmers, a lot of them, that is what they live by. That is their means of income. Who are they going to sell their milk to now? Do you know what was the implication in raising the gas price? All you consider that? And I think that's why all you run to speak to Nestle, because all you realize all you're hitting yet again all your base. All you're hitting all your base. Because a lot of these farmers are Indo-Trinidadians. All you didn't consider that, right? And this goes right back to the closing of Train 4. And you all say it's temporary. And Atlantic LNG Train 1 was permanently closed. I don't know. And this continues to affect different sectors of the economy. These decisions that you all making affecting Trinidad and Tobago. Because we have DOMA, the Downtown Owners and Merchants Association, stated that there have been noticeable increase in business closures due to high operation cost, reduced customer traffic, crime, and broader economic pressures. We have the businesses in manufacturing, retail, and distribution sector have continued to complain about the chronic shortage of foreign exchange, rising import costs, higher fees, crime, and uncertainty. Some business leaders have warned that if this persists, companies may reduce investment or expand into other capable markets, like what we see Nestle is doing right now. And we are even hearing speculations of massive restructuring investment decisions. Who knows what that might entail? Newsday ceased publication in 2026 because of financial and industry pressures. Yellow is the code, right? How all you feeling? How all you feeling? Yellow is the code. I shudder to think. I shudder to think how people eating. How people going to buy the children's school books, uniform for school. How people feeding their children when these companies close their doors, businesses close their doors. How? And now you are trying to pull down Blue Waters, a company that has over 600 workers. You are trying to destroy a company and people name. You all are bringing in King's Council after King's Council after King's Council. Wait, the treasury wasn't empty. We didn't have no money. And you all have King's Council coming in to fight a matter that you all ain't even charging people for. You all have alleged that these people tried to assassinate the Prime Minister and whatever else, and we all know it's about land. And you all brought in King's Councils and keep bringing in more to pay them. Because you know why? That money not coming out all your pocket. It's not coming out all your pocket. But Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know when you always say enough is enough. Because the government is holding innocent people. They have innocent people locked away in the prisons. Locked away in the prisons. All better pray Hadi don't die in that prison. Pray. Evil, wicked government. I hope all you could sleep any night. In fact, all you don't sleep, all you just be on all your broom flying around the country. But Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know when you all will say, enough is enough. Try and enjoy all of it.
Very good. Now, I don't know if the Caribbean citizens are really understanding the profundity of the problem. I think that we are not. I think that we have become so accustomed to living a certain life that we think it's going to last forever. And we think we're just going through a bad patch, and that somehow a savior, a Messiah is going to come and improve lives for us. But do we understand that the system is deliberately being destroyed, right? Do we understand that this is intentionally done, as she's suggesting here, right? And what they want to do is to eventually destroy our lives, that we can depend on them and they can control us. And that is what is happening, whether it's in Trinidad or it's in Jamaica or it's in Barbados. They are intentionally destroying this sort of economic base. If you want to call it the rules-based order that many of them describe it as, but it's a system that is going to deteriorate, that is going to go down, and that is going to recreate and redesign a different job market, which will see many of us being enslaved. But we're not taking life seriously, are we? Are we taking these warnings seriously? Or are we just thinking that we can continue with our gossips as we do on our podcasts, and that is going to lead us into, some greener pastures? So I presented this to you just to make sure that you are reflecting and that you see that the Trinidad and Tobago's economy, which was the hallmark of prosperity in the region, is now coming to an end, right? And the oil and gas, as the first speaker said, the first video we watched, that the Trinidadians and the private sector there in Trinidad, they were sitting down to hoping that the manatee and other fields, oil and gas fields, would have been, would have been resuscitated and given new life and energy, and that they could generate more funds for the economy. But that is not coming to light, right? The United States is controlling everything for itself. When it used CAMLA in terms of taking out Maduro, it was not to improve the lives of Trinidadians. It was actually to control Trinidadians and Tobagonians. And we've got to wake up. And that is what I thought of presenting to you. Let me hear your comments. And the question I'd asked, has Trinidad and Tobago waited too long to diversify its economy, or can the country still build a prosperous future beyond oil and gas? And he's saying that is how Afro-Trinis behave when their party is not in office. If PNM were in office doing all of these things, she and others would be silent. And possibly so, but it doesn't mean, therefore, that the two can't be true, Annie, right? So what she's saying might be partisan in some cases, but at the same time, it is also true what she's saying, that things are really bad and it needs to be improved. Right? So let us learn to understand that even though somebody might be the opposite in terms of their political persuasion, it does not mean that they cannot say something that is true. And some people, like I will watch, read a book and they'll say, oh, that person is not good. Well, it doesn't mean that that person might not be able to say something that is substantive. And that is what we are saying. And I think she did mention some very crucial points. And not only her, but other people are sounding the alarm. Those of us in the middle are way better off. Well, based on the stats that are coming out of Trinidad, they're not suggesting that many people there are better off. What we're seeing now, many people are sounding the alarm that in Trinidad, there are many young people who are not, they're properly educated, well-educated, sophisticated, well-skilled, and they cannot find a job. We're also hearing that many businesses are closing down. And when you have businesses closing down, how is that going to help to rev up the economy? Right? It can't. And then the foreign exchange in Trinidad, the Forex, is not where it should be. There is limited, foreign exchange in Trinidad and Tobago. So the economy of Trinidad is not doing well. And we can't pretend as if it is. And that perhaps that is why Ms. Kamla Persad-Bissessar is trying to enter Mercosur. But as I suggested here, she's going to have to compete with these larger markets. And what if they don't like Trinidadian products? What if they want to, just send and dump their things on Trinidadians and you can't get lots of things into their markets? Because that's what always happens. The bigger markets always exploit smaller markets. So while she's doing something, trying to enter into Mercosur, which is a southern market, sort of a southern common market, it doesn't mean, therefore, that she is going to get, all of that market for Trinidadian products, because the people are not accustomed to Trinidadian products. They might not want to buy them. Okay? And then they're flooding Trinidadian, the market with their produce. And this is what Trinidadians have to look out for. But based on what I'm seeing, and this is not what is just happening in Trinidad, this is happening throughout the Caribbean. But what we were seeing is that Trinidad was the hope for the Caribbean in terms of the industrial base that it had there. But that industrial base, as we're seeing it now, is now, and I think it's now being intentionally being demolished, and something that we have to look out for and speak out against, right? Because it's coming for us too. It's not only Trinidad. I brought that to you today just because I didn't want the video to be long, and I wanted to show you that the Trinidadian market is not what they are telling us that it is. And that many people young people in Trinidad they're hopeless because, they don't see a situation, an economy that is being run in their interest. Neither do they see a future in Trinidad. When we look at the crime rate in Trinidad, that is right now out of this world. I think the crime rate is 27 per 100,000 the last time I checked. So that is not good. And there are reports coming out of the UK about the high criminal rate in Trinidad. And they're telling us that the high crime rate could also affect direct investments. The perception of the Trinidadians in, from a economic perspective point of view. So if an investor considers your country to be crime-ridden, he or she might not want to invest in that country. So these are things that we have to look out, and we have to make sure that we don't try to make these conversations political and partisan, And I know that we are partisan in the Caribbean, and we are partisan. We go to podcasts because we have those that talk against Miss Mia Motley and those that talk against Miss Kamala Persad-Bissessar. But I'm here not because I am partisan. I don't care whether it's PNP or it is PNM or it's UNC. What I care about is objective analysis. And that is what I'm here to do. Now, is there any comment in terms of what do you see? Let me ask the question again for those of you who are just joining. We're looking at Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. And we're asking the question, has Trinidad and Tobago waited too long to diversify its economy, or can the country still build a prosperous future beyond oil and gas? I am of the impression that many of us in the Caribbean don't understand how the economy works. And that's the point. We don't understand, and that is why we make these conversations highly political when they need not be political, because neither of the parties really is doing things in the interest of the majority of people. Okay, and that is the fundamental point we want to make on this program, that the majority of our politicians are working for their global masters, the people who brought them, the financiers who brought them into power, who actually, supported financially their campaign. Okay, so this is what we are talking about. For those of you who are joining, Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. And we are suggesting here that the economy of Trinidad is not in the best of position at the moment. And at any given moment, and for those of you who lived in Jamaica in the 1990s, you understood what happened there with the closures of these domestic businesses. And then we understood that in that era too, you also had limited foreign exchange because of what was happening. Because if there's no productivity, you're going to have limited foreign exchange. Okay, and so what is going to happen is eventually the economy is going to collapse, the domestic economy, and then foreigners will take over. And we're linking it with the whole matter of the third country nationals and how they are sending over to the Caribbean islands. They're sending over third country nationals to take over the cheap labor that will be there. And then they're going to tell us, wow, the work is here and you don't want to do it. Right? The Africans are doing it. The Indians are doing it. The people from the Philippines are doing it. So why can't you do it? Why are you quarreling? And that is why they're going to tell us now that the unemployment rate is low. Something I want to say too, had it not been for YouTube and the social media, I really wonder what the unemployment rate would be in the Caribbean. Thank God for YouTube, even though it has its downfalls, but the TikTok and social media are helping people to make money independently of their governments. If that were not here, if social media were not giving us that opportunity, I think a lot of us the crime rate would be higher, way higher, because people would not be able to find any job at all. And that is why, to some extent, it has contributed to a lower unemployment rate. Welcome, Steve Knight. You say the economy can be repaired. Yes, it can be repaired if we now decide, but we have to look at the root. What is causing the problems? And the root is that we have leaders with their financiers, their private financiers, and they're the ones who are deliberately uprooting the economy, destroying the economy. And if we don't get rid of them, it can't be repaired. But it can be repaired if the system is totally destroyed. At the current moment, the way how things are moving and the way how the system is structured and the corruption that is at the underbelly of the system, I don't think it can be repaired right now. But I agree with you, this is intentional. They waited a little bit too long. Yes. And when we think about it, during COVID, I was asking myself the question, if you are going to close down the global economy, what do you expect? And for a long time. And if they had just said 2 weeks and even 2 weeks would have caused irreparable damage. But they went longer and longer and longer. So I expected it to have collapsed long time ago. I thought that we got some grace period. How did it not collapse during the pandemic? I don't know. All right, but maybe they were doing some voodoo economics. I think they practiced some voodoo economics during COVID, because how the global economy did not collapse during COVID and that lengthy lockdown or lockdowns, I am not sure. Now, with what is happening in Iran, okay, and the fact that we thought that they were going to move into peace, a peace deal, now they're striking each other. But I did tell you that that is not going to happen, that the peace that they were talking about, Trump and Iran were talking about, was not going to happen, right? So we can expect that oil and gas will go up. We can expect that the cost of oil and gas will go up, okay? We have Annie saying TNT had a forex problem since the 1990s, but it's not as grave as it is now, Annie, right? Because in the 1990s, Trinidad was, it was the beginning stages of the industrialization of its economy, right? So I remember that many Jamaican businesses left and they went to Trinidad because of the cheaper energy there in Trinidad. So Trinidad was beginning in the 1990s to industrialize its economy. And that is why you saw a boom in 2006 to 2014. And many people in 2007, 8, thereabout, were saying that Trinidad was on its way to becoming a first world country. Many people were saying that because of the oil boom, the oil and gas boom that was there, right? But that is becoming now a time of the past. It's no longer happening. And people are sounding the alarm. And we don't want to make this conversation political, right? We want to make it economically grounded, right? And grounded in facts and truth. Now, in my opinion, Stephen is saying during COVID, they tried to crash the economy. They tried to do a reset. Yes, when we saw what because even 2 days or a week of closing down the global economy. This was not just the economy in Trinidad or Jamaica. This was the entire world, right? The global economy. By the way, as I'm telling you that, did you hear from NBC today that the Europeans are now joining the United States with this TCN, the third country nationals and deportation, right? So today, Europe has said that they are going to join in with the deportation practices and policies of the United States of America, right? So how is that going to complicate life for us in the Caribbean, right? And will we be joining eventually? And how are these things going to affect our country? As I suggested to you, the gentleman that was deported from the United States, the Jamaican national, and he was a citizen, right? Had his citizenship there, and they deported him all the way to Eswatini. And he's saying that it was equivalent to slavery, the way how he was treated. They placed him in the worst detention cell, right, that you can imagine. Now we're hearing that the Europeans are going to join hands with the United States in its deportation policies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not, we're not going to win that. I mean, this is so much is happening right now that I don't think the Caribbean region is awake to understand. If we were awake, perhaps, but we're not awake. I think that we're still living in our nationalistic zones where we think that we are better than the other, Barbadian better than Trinidadian, Trinidadian better than Barbadian and Jamaican. And we argue like this. And we don't want to hear these sort of commentaries because it affects our nationalistic pride and ego. And I'm telling you that these people who are leading you don't care about you. So you can be nationalistic and patriotic all you want to do, and nothing is wrong with patriotism or nationalism, but it has to be grounded in reality. Okay, and that is what we're here to discuss this afternoon. Any other comment? We're discussing today Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. And we are looking at economy and crime, and these two are interrelated, if people don't have jobs, they are going to engage in illicit trafficking, illicit trafficking of guns, of drugs, and other narcotics. And that is going to increase the homicide rate, as we're seeing happening there in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So we cannot now close our eyes and think that Trinidad is not going through a rough patch. It is. It is going through a rough patch, and it is serious. But many Trinidadians are also not really, admitting they're using politics too. Those are the UNC. Oh, if it were the PNM, they would have done this, or UNC. But we have to understand that we have to put away our politics too, or political partisanship, and begin to understand that these things are going to affect everyone, irrespective of whether or not you are UNC members or PNM. All right, can we do that now so that we can have a serious intellectual conversation, unbiased, the best of our knowledge? But we cannot now begin to say that this is, because somebody says it and that person is PNM or UNC, it means that it should be disregarded. Okay, that is not what we're here about. We are here to look at the facts, and we don't care if it's Obama who tells the facts, or it is George Bush, or it is Bill Clinton. What we care is if these are facts. If it's the truth, then we are going to embrace it. If it's not the truth, then we throw it out. And many of us are saying that we prefer to die with our leader. Well, die with that leader, because the leader is not going to help you. All right? The leader is not here to help you. We are the ones now will have to, try to understand and try to build and to put pressure on the government. But if we don't do that, the government is not going to work in our interest. Has never been working in our interest, and will never work. All right? Any comments? Any other questions? We're looking at Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. What do you think about Mercosur? I think I have pronounced my opinions about it, but what do you think? If you have Trinidadians in the chat, what do you think about Mercosur? Do you think it is a good decision by Trinidad and Tobago to enter into that market? What are the advantages or disadvantages to you? Do you want to join the chat? Let me see if I could also send to you I could invite you on the platform if you want to chat. It's Friday, so many of you probably don't want to write and you just want to talk. No problem. You can enter the chat. Let me send the link, and via audio if you want, or if you want to show yourself, that is no problem. All right, so I'll send you the link. I'm sending it. Yeah, it's right now on the screen. Those of you who'd like to join, here it is. If you want to chat rather than write. If you are tired, it's Friday, so some of you might want to just talk rather than write. Any comments? Then we can end the chat. We can end the stream if you have nothing to say. For those of you who are joining, we're looking, and I'm going to close it if you have nothing more to say. Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. Right? This is what we're discussing this afternoon. And we're saying that Trinidad and Tobago is in a very precarious position, right? That the economy is not healthy, and that at any moment it can collapse, and we've got to get our acts together. Now, like you said, it's good and bad, right? So it's good and bad. We want to know where it's good, Annie, and we want to know where it's bad, right? I'm sure it has good, it has advantages, and let us look at the advantages and let's look at the disadvantages, right, of the Mercosur, because we know that Trinidad and Tobago, and I showed you a video done by a Trinidadian who showed us how the United States, even from the 1970s, wanted Trinidad and Guyana out of CARICOM and was dividing CARICOM. And now we're seeing a repeat of that history, where Trinidad and Tobago were invited, and Guyana were invited to Trump's, what you call it again, that meeting there in Florida, right? And we can see where they are pro-US. And even though I must say CARICOM is pro-US too. So it's all theater. When we look at what Kamala is doing and Irfan Ali, Andrew Holness, all of them are on the same. They're just using rhetoric, but the CARICOM certainly is controlled by the United States. But we can see now where Trinidad is actually, looking at other markets, and I think if they yet joined it? Have they yet joined Mercosur? Is it yet signed? Is the deal yet signed, or are they still in negotiations? I think that it's about to be signed. I think Sean Sobers actually went to a meeting, Mercosur meeting, sometimes earlier last month or late last month. And he's saying they might try to take advantage of a small market by dumping their goods. Yes, I think that's what is going to happen, right? Because that is what always happens, that the larger markets always take advantage of the smaller markets. What I think Trinidad would have to do, something that the Southerners, the South American people don't have. So they would have to study the market very well and see something that they would perhaps like from Trinidad. It can't be just biscuits and, and cookies and whatever, because they have their biscuits and cookies that perhaps they like, right? I'm not saying they won't like Trinidad and biscuits and cookies, but that might not generate enough funds to move Trinidad forward. Because what essentially happened, if we are going to speak the truth, is that Trinidad was the industrial base. Trinidad was like China to the Caribbean, right? Trinidad produced everything for the Caribbean region, whether it's Jamaica, Barbados, all of the other Caribbean territories. Trinidad was responsible for producing everything, snacks, everything practically for the rest of us. So if they lose that sort of base, it can tanker their economy seriously. So, we might not be a huge market like South America, but it was huge enough for an island like Trinidad and Tobago. We have now, Stephen is saying, the only people who are going to benefit from a collapsed economy is the oligarchs. And that's why they want it to collapse. And when I say the economy will collapse, I don't mean it's going to collapse in the sense that they won't have their base, the oligarchs. It's just that it won't be an economy for the people, right? So the people's, I'm talking here, we have to make the distinction between the people's economy and the global elites and their cronies, the domestic oligarchs, right? They have their economy, but it won't be run in the interest of the people. And that's what we're saying, that the people's economy is what is going to crash. When they had FinSac in Jamaica, the oligarchs benefited and they became wealthy, but the majority of Jamaicans became poor. So yes, FinSac worked for the oligarchs. It didn't work for Jamaicans. And that's what I'm saying. So we have to now distinguish between what economy are we talking about, all right? And we have Annie saying later on the islands can join in. Well, I don't know. Because, based on what I'm seeing, Annie, I think that the U.S. is one pushing Trinidad into that market, Mercosur. I think the Americans are trying to create divisions, amongst CARICOM, among the CARICOM members, so that whatever, we are trying, any unit that we have to build for the people, the United States is actually trying to demolish it, to divide us so that they can conquer. Right? Because they want our resources. And whatever unity that CARICOM might have had or was trying to strike, they would want to see if the resources, for whatever it is, could be, dispensed to all of us, and would benefit from whatever Trinidad have or what Guyana might have, wherever, right? But what we're seeing now is that the U.S. is pushing a certain agenda, and they're trying to disunite those of us. Look at the General Secretary of CARICOM, and look at all of what they're talking about, and she should not have come back. All of that is nonsense, How is that helping? What does it have to do with the price of bread? What does it have to do with the price of bread if she's General Secretary, or even if you become, or I become General Secretary tomorrow? It doesn't have anything to do with anything. But they're creating a lot of, nonsensical theater. At the end of the day, we are the ones who are suffering because they're not dealing with the substance that we need to talk about. So they can spend all they want to talk about, and that's exactly what they were doing at CARICOM the last meeting, talking about sending the case over to the CCJ about the person who was reelected to be General Secretary of CARICOM, right? It doesn't have anything to do with anything. It doesn't have anything to do with the price of gas and oil or the foreign exchange of Trinidad or Jamaica. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. But that's the game that they're playing with us, and this is what we're talking about. And people would rather go and talk about what is happening, the rift, and what CARICOM and who said what, and what Sean Sober said and what he didn't say, without any context. And that is what attracts people to go to streams and talk about nonsense. But at the end of the day, we need to look at Mercosur, the advantages, look at the context, the history of Mercosur, right? Look at how perhaps race and racism could be a part of that structure, because South America is a racist bloc, whether we like it or not, right? It's a racist bloc. Brazil, even though it has the largest number of black people outside of Africa, is a very racist country. Argentina, right? And all these countries. But the US is pushing Trinidad in that direction, and perhaps Guyana, I'm not sure. Status is saying baby bonds to be paid out on the 18th birthday can create a just society. Being law-abiding could be an obvious condition to receive payment. If there is enough money to thief, there is enough money for this. Yes, but as again, I'm saying that I don't know if the policies that they're designed, as I'm saying, StateX, they have two objectives. One is to enrich the global domestic elites, and the other to impoverish the majority of citizens in our respective island states. And I think that they are accomplishing the agenda of impoverishing us, because if we're not impoverished, they can't control us. And we're moving to the surveillance state. All right, and the digital economy. And for that to ever happen, Caribbean people have to be poor, right? For them to acquiesce to the agenda and to what they're doing. Okay, so they are deliberately, and I'm telling you, this is nothing that is, I'm not harsh, it's the truth. They are deliberately, intentionally destroying our economy. Right? So we have to now realize that that's exactly what they're doing. Stephen is saying they are creating a lot of distractions because they don't want to focus on these countries' economies. Right. They're not talking about the economies. They're talking about, this lady who, okay, if you ask many Caribbean citizens, they don't know who the General Secretary is, and they're not interested. If you ask many other citizens of the Caribbean, that person that they're claiming should not have been reelected, many citizens don't know, and neither do they care. They just see her every time when she probably in the media, in newspaper, in the press, on TV, and apart from that, they don't care. Right? Annie's saying, I will not compare the JA market with the Trinidadian market because I believe both markets are different. The majority of Trinidadians are middle class, so a great lot of Trinidadians have accumulated wealth. Now, when you say middle class, what do you mean by that? The same thing Americans like to say that they're middle class. But many persons are realizing even in rich America, even in wealthy America, wealthier than Trinidad, they know that they are just one paycheck away from poverty. Many people who say that they're middle class in America, and I'm sure in Trinidad, are just one or probably two paychecks away from poverty. Okay, so be careful of what you say is middle class, because what they're doing right now is to divide us, as I'm saying, Annie, and then they make us just the very wealthy, as they have in Jamaica for the most part, and the poor. And that is what they're essentially doing in all countries around the world, not just in Jamaica. But Jamaica might have been, before Trinidad, but Trinidad is moving in that direction very quickly. Stephen is saying, I listened to the meeting the other day, and it is a bunch of fluff and fancy words. That's exactly what it's about. It's nothing that it has to do. And by the way, we have to understand that there is nothing wrong in comparing economies. Jamaican, Guyanese, Trinidad, whatever. We're not here to say that we're comparing and saying that one is better, one is worse, or one is, whatever. What we're here to look, we're looking at the principles of economics, right? And we're looking at what they're doing and the fact that we are seeing signs of what happened in Jamaica. Jamaica had a big middle class too in the 1990s, right? And they destroyed it. They destroyed, as I told you, they destroyed the black middle class in Jamaica. They ravaged it, and it was intentional. And they sold everything out, the wealth out to a white Texan. A white Texan. Okay? So when we're thinking that this is our middle class, you might see that you are not middle class tomorrow. Now, Annie's saying Jamaicans, on the other hand, had not gotten there at the time of their crash. I would not say that. Right? I would not say that they had not gotten there. I think that Jamaica had quite an established middle class in the 1990s with very robust domestic banks. And what they did, they got rid of all the domestic businesses, including domestic banks, and then allowed the foreign banks like the Canadian banks, Bank of Nova Scotia, to take over, run the country, and not in the interest of Jamaicans. Right? So, yeah, Jamaica had a pretty, strong middle class back in those days too. Okay? Now, so this is saying Trinidad and Guyana will be sucked dry and thrown away like a used napkin by the U.S. when there's nothing left to extract. But Caribbean elites will feed their children and will go abroad. Absolutely. And that's what we're saying to Annie, that we're not here. If the governments were working in our interests, then we could say that they're seeking to protect Trinidadian middle class. And that is what I would like them to do. But what is happening in Trinidad now, everybody is being impacted. If businesses begin to close down, and they're saying that many are being closed down in Trinidad as we speak, then the middle class is going to hollow. And that's what happened in Jamaica. I am not here to compare and to say that I don't know how it will happen, but what we can see signs. And when we see signs now, we can say, hey, that happened in Africa or that happened in Brazil, right? Nothing is wrong in looking at countries and patterns, right? And say the same thing might have happened in Nazi Germany. That's why people are sounding the alarm also in America. Is America Nazi Germany? At least not yet, but it's moving there, right? And that's why people are saying, look at what Hitler did. Look at the economic conditions that what led to, the coming of Hitler in Germany. Okay, so we have to look at the way marks, whether we like to or not. Annie's saying many Americans are not middle class. Americans call the working poor middle class. Now, how would you describe Trinidadian middle class, and how are they different from American middle class? Annie, could you tell me that? Typical Trinidadian middle class has what in comparison to an American middle class? So let us, yes, I'm not saying that you are wrong in saying that, but I would like to understand, how is the middle class in Trinidad different from the middle class in America, and what makes the difference? Is the middle class in Trinidad stronger than the middle class in the United States? Okay. I would like to hear that. And how did that happen? I don't know. But what people are from Trinidad, please let me know. Annie is talking. I think she's from Trinidad, or she might be. Are you Trinidadian, Annie, or you were born in Grenada and then live in Trinidad? I forgot what you told me about that history. But the fact is, if you are Trinidadian, you're in the chat, please let me know what is happening and what you think. For those of us who are not in the country, you can share with us your direct experience, your lived experience, which is more important than what we are talking about, because nothing beats lived experience, right? So for those of you who live in Trinidad, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the decimation of the economy, or are you seeing where the Trinidadian economy is growing and businesses are thriving, and you think that there is lots of hope for young people in that society? Or you're Trinidadian, right? Okay, so yes. So yes, Annie, can you tell us now how you think a middle class Trinidadian differs from a middle class American? In what way do they differ? right? Because we would like to know that, because we thought that America was the blueprint of what we call is known as the middle class of the world, right? But maybe they're not. Perhaps Trinidad is. So let's know what the difference is. Any other comment? Very interesting topic for those of you who are joining. Trinidad and Tobago in crisis. We're asking that question. Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. A very important topic for an economy that was the prize and joy of the region, right? It is perhaps still the industrial base, right, of the Caribbean. Much of what we consume in the region actually come out of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's very important, whether you're from Jamaica or you're from Barbados or you're from Antigua and Barbuda or Guyana, this is an important topic. And so often we like to, when it's not about us, when it's not talking about our island, we move on. We think that it is nothing connected to us. But yes, everything is interconnected now. We're living in a globalized world, global economy, which means that whatever happens in Europe is going to impact what happens here in the Caribbean. So how is it what is happening in Trinidad will not send ripple effects to what is happening in Jamaica, in Barbados, and other parts of the Caribbean region? Now we have Annie saying, I live in the US, and if we don't get one paycheck, we end up in a soup kitchen and homeless. You don't see that in the Caribbean. I see what you're saying. Right. And that is the reality of many of the islands. Why? Because I think that we are probably more community driven and community oriented, where if you lose your job, you might be able to go back and live with your sister or your brother or your aunt or somebody in the Caribbean probably will put you up, right? In the United States, that might not be the case for the most part. People like you to leave and they don't want you to be around, right? So to some extent, we still live and still have some amount of our extended the village as, in terms of helping each other, while in the United States, people tend to live the whole independent lives, right? Where everybody lives to his or her, own, right? And that is the difference. I see what you're saying. Okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah, from that perspective, you're correct. We're looking at Trinidad and Tobago and the crisis that they are actually going through at the moment. I thought that this would have generated lots of interaction because it is something, if the industrial base of the region goes, all right, or tankers, what's going to happen to us? Who is going to be producing the United States for the Caribbean, right? And that's what we're asking. And the situation in Trinidad and Tobago is not looking pretty, right? It's not looking pretty. We don't know how long it's going to be. I'm not a prophet, so I don't know how long it will last. I will not pretend as if I know, but based on what I am reading, okay, and listening to videos coming from respected Trinidadians, it's not pretty. Okay, it's not pretty. So please like the video and please share the live with as many people after the live is finished, so that others who were not able to come to the live can listen to it and find some sort of respond to it, right? Respond to the videos, because we have to push the algorithm to send out these videos so that people can be informed, right? We can't just be hearing rubbish every day, and that is how we are going to be moving forward in the Caribbean. Now, we went through worse in the 80s. Yeah, okay, yes, and that is true, right? And I think I did do something on that. If you were here, an introduction, and to see how in the 80s you went through worse, and then you picked up in the 1990s and leading into the 2000s. However, what we're seeing now is different. Okay, what we're seeing in the world is that we're going through a global crisis. In the 80s, we were a part of a global world, but the world wasn't as globalized as it is now. So when we talk about the destitution, and we're sounding the alarm right now, is because our world is more interconnected than it was in the 1980s, or even in the early 1990s, certainly, right? So it is different than the 80s. So we're not just going to come back like that, because everything is interconnected. Global capital, global finance, all of these things are interconnected. Global elites are also more interconnected. Okay? So that is what we're actually looking at. So we're looking at Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. And we're asking a very important question. Should the economy of Trinidad be diversified? Or should they continue with just the oil and natural gas as the predominant, what you call it now, economic growth model, right? As if you will. Now, remember now that that's what we have always done right throughout history, whether it was sugar, cane sugar, or it was Jamaica's bauxite. Jamaica and also Guyana had bauxite, okay, that they were making lots of monies from, but they never diversified the economy. And what happened? Jamaica is just now a slave tourism, market, which is not generating enough funds for people to sustain them and themselves and their families. And it seems that Trinidad did not learn its lessons from the other Caribbean nations by diversifying the energy sector. And now that it finds itself where that sector is dying in that country, what will happen to it? Will it tanker? Or will it transition into another form of productive sector? That's the question that people are asking, but we're not hearing anything coming from the private sector of Trinidad that would give people any sense of hope that they are trying to diversify the economy and usher Trinidadians into a different century, a different era, if you will. Okay? So that's what we're looking at. It's a very difficult conversation to have. Caribbean people don't like difficult conversations, and that is what is happening. What we're seeing. We have to have these difficult conversations. We've got to have these nuanced conversations, and that they're just not loaded with politics and who belongs to what. Okay, but that we see the interconnectedness of our region and know that whatever happens in one country in the region is going to affect us. And we're suggesting here that Trinidad is the industrial base of the Caribbean, the industrial hub, if you will, of the Caribbean. And the fact that it is folding its wings right now, what effect will that have on the rest of the Caribbean islands? It is yet to be seen. Will the US now be the major producer? It wants China out too. So are they trying now to say, we want to be the country who produces for you that we can just dump our things and make money off you? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Please let me know. Any more response? I see Annie saying here, they launched a tourism product a few days ago. Well, tourism is not for, tourism, they will learn very soon that tourism is not for the development of the country. It's a service economy. It's not going to build. A few people, yes, don't get me wrong, a few people will get good jobs, but it's just a few. The managers and some of the people, supervisors, right? And perhaps some nurses, a few doctors. But the majority of these jobs are just service jobs that are not for, people who are graduating from university, right? These are just for the working class people. Okay, so tourism should be out of it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have, and that they should diversify. So tourism perhaps should be a part of it, but tourism certainly cannot be the foundation, because if it stands at the foundation, it's just going to be a slave-ridden economy, a plantation economy, just like Jamaica is, and perhaps Barbados. All right. So I hope Trinidad is not, moving in that direction of the other Caribbean territories like Jamaica. Okay. Yeah, we're discussing, for those of you who are joining, Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. What about crime? Annie, what about crime? What do you see? Do you see an improvement in crime? Do you think that people outside of Trinidad and Tobago are exaggerating the whole crime scenario in Trinidad, or do you think that the high crime rate is in fact a reality in Trinidad and Tobago? What do you think, Annie? Do you think that the report coming out of the UK that they're exaggerating about Trinidad when the country, because, sometimes they do exaggerate. Sometimes they do talk as if, things are, worse than they appear to be. Okay? So we know that. We know the West likes to do that and to create this alarm and make us feel as if our islands are, going to die tomorrow, going to tanker tomorrow, when that is not the case. But what do you think? What about the crime in Trinidad and Tobago? What do you think? Trinidadians, are you there? Let me hear from you. What is happening with the crime? Because right now, as it stands, the last stats I saw, Trinidad was 27 per 100,000 in terms of the high homicide rate in that country. Right? So what do you guys think? Do you think that this is just a tale and it is not necessarily true? It's not the reality that Trinidadians and Tobagonians are encountering? Please let me know. Annie's saying there is no improvement in crime, but most of TNT's crime is gang related. And this is what Jamaicans always say too. Yes, so if it's gang related, does mean that it is not there, right? So if it's gang related, it's a problem. Right? So Jamaicans like to talk like that too, that, oh, it's just gang related. So, well, guess what? Get rid of the gangs. Because the fact of the matter is that if you're saying it's just gang related, yeah, but it is crime. People are going to see that, they're not safe. So whether it's coming from the government or it's coming from me, it's coming from the church, right? It is causing crime. It's creating an alarm and they have to get rid of it. But I don't like the excuse, Annie, as Jamaicans like to give to, oh, it's just the gangs. So I have been hearing that in Jamaica from the devil was a boy, that it's just the gangs. But yes, so how long are we going to say it's just the gangs? And if we know that it's the gangs, why don't we eradicate or get rid of the root of the gangs? In Jamaica, surprisingly, many of the politicians work along with gang members. I hope that is not happening in Trinidad and Tobago. In Jamaica, most of the gang leaders, and that's why you had that row between Washington and Kingston in 2010 when they wanted Christopher Dudus Coke, right? Because the then Prime Minister of Jamaica, that is Bruce Golding, not that he was in bed with him, but it was his constituency. Now, he knew that the guy ran things in that constituency, and he had the power to have dethroned him, but did not. So likewise, many of the politicians know these gangsters, know the leaders of these gangs, right? Yet still, because they give them money for their political campaigns, and they're also benefactors to these constituencies, because guess what? The state has lost its power, right? It can't give them, meet the needs of these people. Do you know that when Christopher Dudus Coke was being requested of the United States, the members of the constituency, that's West Kingston, they protested and they told the U.S. president, the then U.S. President Barack Hussein Obama, that we're not sending him because he provides for children, he sends our children to school, and the state does not do that. Okay? So I'm hoping that that is not the reality in Trinidad, because if it is the reality in Trinidad, it means that the crime is not going to go down, because politics and gangsterism are in bed together. All right? Hope we understand that. Now, Annie's saying, I'm not saying it is just the gangs. Right, but I think that's what you said. You said that it's not most of it. You said most of it, TNT's crime is gang related. So yes, so if most of it comes from the gangs, it means therefore that if we should eradicate the gangs or try to uproot the gangs in Trinidad and in Jamaica and other countries, then what will happen is that crime will significantly be reduced. Okay? But what is happening in Jamaica and many other countries, in Brazil, the gangs work with the politicians and the business elites. and the business elites. And then they're dressed in jackets, right, in suits, and they tell you that we want to get rid of the gangs. Andrew Holness is saying we need to get rid of the gangs. At the end of the day, they talk with them. They know them. So why don't they get rid of them? They have the power of the state to get rid of them, but they refuse. Why? Because they're gangsters too, if the truth be told. Now, we have Annie saying, I am just saying most visitors will not be affected. It is a bunch of little black boys killing out each other and fighting for turf. Wow. Well, black Trinidadians think that you're being racist here, Annie, because you just say there's just a little black, some black boys, as they would say also in America, that black people are the ones creating, the huge crime and violence and so forth. But when we look at the top of the crime and violence hierarchy, we see a lot of business elites and politicians, and so the black boys might be the ones who do the dirty job for the big guys, right, who might be Syrians and whites and other people, right? So that is the whole matter of the fact. Yeah, so what is happening though, Annie, when we say that it's the visitors, let's attack what you're saying, the visitors will be safe, and that's what they do in Jamaica. So in Jamaica too, very few visitors in Jamaica are impacted by crime and violence. Very few. But what is the purpose of the state? To protect citizens, to protect foreigners or visitors, or to protect their citizens? And I would think it's both, right? The function of the state is to protect the citizens and anybody who wants to visit the country. And their first priority ought to be the citizens, because we are the ones paying taxes. Okay, and these visitors who go there on tour, on trips, like the tourists, their monies go out, right? Because these are foreign investors. But the citizens are the ones who vote, pay taxes, right? So therefore, the government should be more committed to them than the foreigners. And I would dare say, as I've always said, if the citizens are safe, then the visitors will be safe. No need to worry about visitors going to the island, because if the citizens are safe, then that is what we want to have. Other people will come because the perception is that the country is safe. Okay, but what Jamaica does, I hope Trinidad is not going to go there, is that they make enormous efforts to make sure, to ensure that the visitors are taken care of and that they're safe, while the people living there are being slaughtered. So isn't that a plantation? What do you call that? Plantation. We're living on grand plantations, economically, socially, culturally, politically. And we need to embrace that reality. Right? Little black boys. And that might be true. Little black boys. Why are the little black boys? Why aren't there little Indians or Syrians or Lebanese, Chinese, Trinidadians who might be doing that? Why are just the little black boys? And that might be true. It's not Annie now. We can't attack Annie, because that might be true. That is just the little black boys, as we have in Jamaica too. Right? The big black boys and the little black boys are the ones perpetrating the criminal acts. Okay? And we see the hierarchy of the racial. We spoke about racism in the Caribbean, and we see how the economics informs what happens, the class system. So what you have is these people at the top, the other ethnic groups, right at the top, Europeans, probably the Lebanese in Trinidad, the Syrians, and you have the Indians and other groups. And black people are the ones they're going to blame now, saying that they're the root of the criminal, regime. How sad. How sad. But that might be true. But we have to say why. Why are we having just little black boys in Trinidad and perhaps some big black boys too, or black men? Could it be economic? Could it be because they have been suppressed, exploited? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. So, yeah, interesting question, interesting conversation, interesting topic that I thought would have generated much more interaction, much more participation. But maybe it's Friday night also and you're engaged with other activities. So, ladies and gentlemen, try to like the live, share it with others, because this is a very important topic and Caribbean people need to take stock. Thank you so much for joining. Let me see another comment that you have from Annie. And then if we have no more, then we will end it, because I think I've spoken enough. We have here, well, the other races may be in it, but they are not on the ground doing the dirty work. Correct. Right. I'm not, you're right. 100% correct. And that's why we're asking Annie, why? Why are the black boys, the little black boys or the black men participating in that very nefarious, creating these, harms and the criminality in Trinidad and perhaps worldwide, while you have the minorities, not the minorities in terms of Trinidad, but the other ethnicity, the other ethnic groups at the top. They are the ones leading the economy, perhaps the authors, the intellectual authors of these criminal activities, but they contract these low-end people to do the job, to do the dirty job. The Caribbean is very sad, aren't we? And we're not talking about these things every day. We like to look at the United States. Oh, the United States is racist. Oh, Europe is racist. And all we have in the Caribbean is paradise. But when we look beneath the surface, it is sad. It is sad. And there is an element of, what should I, silence. And it is consensual that we can't talk about it. Because if we do, and we rock the boat, we might either be unalived, or we might not be able to get the job. They will fire us because we're challenging the status quo. But there's some real, what should I say now, sad element of living in the Caribbean. It is sad. And if you have lived in countries like the United States and in Europe, where you've seen white racism versus other types of racism and classism, and you return to the Caribbean and you're seeing some elements of that and worse. And the fact that it's worse is that we can't talk about it. We're not talking about these things. Because if we talk about these things, then we are going to get rid of the system. And the oligarchs don't want us to get rid of the system because it benefits them. So we have to speak in very diplomatic language that, oh, we're paradise and we're moving along and we are just like the United States. Years ago, they had racism and they had segregation and we are step by step moving along. But are we really progressing? No, the system is intact, is the same system that was there from the 1960s. No change to it. But what happens is that we can run to the United States, we can run to Europe, we can run to Canada. But what happens when we can't run to these countries anymore? And we have to stay within the Caribbean? What's going to happen to us? Annie's saying the question you need to ask is, why aren't the little black girls doing it since they are growing up in the same communities? Well, we know that, girls and boys, they're different roles that they play. The girls perhaps get pregnant and they might do things too. They might be involved in other tasks, but they're not the ones who are going to take up the guns. And yeah, so that's just about for any community. The same thing happens in the United States, that, the guns and so forth and the rough sort of jobs, women won't do that. I'm not saying few might not be involved, but the majority of time, women are of the softer side, so they're not going to be involved in that sort of ruffian, gangsterism, if you will, of going to knock. You have to knock people and, and you have to be tough, right? And most women are not tough, right? So that is to be expected, not only in Trinidad, but in Jamaica. The same is true in other parts of the world, right? That women would not be part, but they participate in the fact that they sometimes remain silent, and they do other things to, ensure that their boyfriends or their lovers, get away with these criminal acts. So they are complicit too. In some cases, these women and girls, as you're saying, Annie, some of them are complicit, just that they're not performing the role of going out there and shooting up people and killing, because that requires some amount of badmanism, if you will, and being tough. And women are generally not as tough as men are. Hello everyone. Good evening, Alexis. And today we're discussing Trinidad and Tobago in crisis. We're asking that question: Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. Do you think Trinidad should go out, and should they leave CARICOM? Should Trinidad now leave CARICOM and form another market? What do you think, Trinidadians? Then we have Annie saying the boys don't want to go to school and work. Yes, because there are no jobs, as we're saying, right? There are no jobs. People are saying, I read a letter, Annie, before probably you came on the platform, and what the article was saying is that there are no jobs in Trinidad. And, well, there are few jobs. I shouldn't say there are no jobs, because that would be a lie, but there are few jobs available in Trinidad. And I understand that the government is suggesting, using stats to suggest that the unemployment rate is standing at 4.3. Right, but that is not so. People who work on the ground are suggesting that many Trinidadians are leaving universities very well qualified, and they cannot find jobs. And people are asking, where are the jobs? And the government is saying that there are jobs, but there are none. So the fact of the matter is that many Trinidadians cannot find jobs, and they're educated. Imagine these poor, hapless people living in the, what do you call it now, marginalized communities of Trinidad and Tobago. They're not going to be able to find jobs, right? So that is why they find gangsterism. Now, when economies flounder, when they falter, what happens is that drugs and criminality replace productivity. That's what happened in Jamaica. Talk about, comparing Jamaica. Yes, now Trinidadians need to look at the history of Jamaica and look at where it went wrong. It didn't just start overnight. Jamaica wasn't always violent. Right? Jamaica was not always a violent country, right? It is because of the fact that the economics was not properly dealt with, and gangsterisms and drug trafficking and gun trafficking replaced productivity and education, where people no longer thought that education really was going to lift them up to the next level. They thought that just, singing a few songs and becoming a dancehall whatever, and not everybody can become a dancehall singer. So the other thing that they could do probably is to go into gangsterism and drug trafficking. Alexis is saying, let me go up here. CARICOM is an organization implemented and directed by the West imperialists. Yes, all Caribbeans should leave. Yeah. This is the best comment probably for the entire night. Yes, you're correct. Maybe all of us should leave because CARICOM is really run by the West. Correct. I agree 100% with you. We should try to form independent blocs, right, of the United States. How could we do that? That would be a good, question, a good follow-up question, Alexis. How do we accomplish that? Because that is a very good response. Clever and on point. Now, excuse me. Annie's saying, I don't think so. They don't want to work. I have a relative like that right now. Every time he gets a job, he walks away. Why? Is the job well paid? Because that's another thing too. They're telling us that there are jobs, but the jobs are low paid. People can hardly survive on those jobs. People talk about poor customer service in the Caribbean, and people are saying, well, the service is poor because people are tired. They can't really survive on the income that is paid to them. So they're not motivated to work, right? And if they can go on YouTube or go into gangsterism and make some money in that way, I am not now saying that that's what they should do, because I don't endorse gangsterism in any sense of the word. I do not endorse criminality. I don't believe in it. I believe we should work for what is available and try their best, work hard. That is what I believe. That is my belief system. Okay? So, but the fact of the matter, I'm saying I'm trying to think how people think. I'm trying to get into their heads. And I'm saying that the reason why they do it is not because some of them want to do it, is because they have no other choice. But I agree with you, though, Annie, that they can be victims of their environment. And if they're not seeing other people productive, as you're suggesting, then they won't be productive. Many people say, why are Black Americans lazy? And why are they not at the same level of white Americans? Because the system is designed that way. And most white people wake up to see, I'm not saying you don't have poor whites, you have a lot of them there too, but we're talking on the whole. As a collective, they do better. Why? Because if they can see that most of their people are productive in society, then that is what they should do, and that's what they grew up on doing. But if they, on the other end, Blacks see that most of Black men are in prison and they're not doing well, then they are going to pattern that lifestyle, because the man in prison and the gangster are their role models. Right? And that's what we have to understand. Now, Alexis is saying there is enough for the Caribbean to offer employment. The Caribbean is developing. There is much to be done. What is happening, though, Alexis, is development for whom? We're seeing all of these structures, these, network, these highways, and fancy things going up in the Caribbean. But yet people are not asking for whom. For whom is this growth? For whom is this development? We see that in the United States too, upper echelon, these apartments, upscale apartments being built, and most people cannot afford them. Most people can't afford the apartments in the United States. So these high-end apartments, luxurious apartments. So we also have to ask the question, yes, it's being developed, but for whom and at whose cost? That's what we have to ask. And Annie's saying many young Afro-Trini men are dropping out of school, so they don't want to study either. Yes, but that's what we're asking. If they're studying and they're not able to get a job, they're asking themselves why. Jamaicans are asking themselves that too. Why are we going to school? Americans are now dropping out of school. Do you know that? Americans, of all people, who would go to school, go to college. The next thing is to go to college. Many of them, they are saying in America now that there is a huge reduction in people going to college and universities. Why? Because they do not see where they're getting into jobs. They're racking up debt. Right? So these are realities that we have to deal with. It's not that they just don't want to go to school. It's that they don't connect school and education with economic success, with financial independence. And this is happening globally. Now, the governments need to be transparent, Alexis is saying, about our situation. The governments will not be transparent because they're working for the global elites, domestic elites, the oligarchs, and hence they will try to cover up. Their objective and their task, their purpose is to cover up and to say that we're doing well when we're not. But when they say we're doing well on behalf of the wealthy, the billionaire class, the millionaires, but they're not speaking on our behalf, right? Remember I told you in one of the videos that our economies are being run just like when we had the plantations and you had governors. So you had, a governor in Barbados represented the British Crown, right? A governor in Jamaica, a governor in St. Kitts and Nevis, a governor in Guyana, right? And they represented the islands on behalf of these governors, on behalf of the crown, but not on behalf of the people who lived there. They were just living subsistence lifestyle, right? That's what we're living right now. We're barely surviving. Okay? So that is what is happening, and we have to have these discussions and stop blaming the people, the populace, yes, we also have to accept responsibility. Yes, we have to try to be creative. But the sad thing is, which is very sad, and I'm saying it, sometimes creativity, some of the most creative people, I should say, are people who are involved in these gangster activities. Right. And only if we could save them. But they're lost because of the wrong environment, poor political policies, poor economic policies, I should say. And as a result of that, they find themselves in those unfortunate situations. Okay? Yeah. This is a very important topic for those who are joining. Trinidad and Tobago in crisis, Mercosur, CARICOM, crime, and the economy. We hope that the algorithm will wake up the video here and send it over to many people so that they can be a part of this conversation. For those of you who will be watching the replay, make sure that you tell me where you are writing from and let me know what is happening in your neck of the woods. Are you seeing your economy growing? Is there any hope for young people? Or do you see the economy moving in the same direction that we have spoken about that Trinidad and Tobago is moving in right now? I want you to tell me. I want you to describe for me so we can help each other. That's how we are going to have the conversation and begin to have in the chat to say what is happening, and we can compare and contrast, because this is not the time now to be so patriotic and show blind patriotism. We should be patriotic, but we should not demonstrate blind patriotism, right? We must be authentic, and we must understand that the situation that we're seeing right now is a desperate one. And it's not about the PNM. It's not about the UNC. It's not about PNP or JLP. It's about Caribbean people. And are we going to be able to survive in this period of economic decline where wars are being waged every day? And every day we do not see any end in terms of any peace. And if there can't be peace, if there's no peace worldwide, then our economies are going to be demolished. All right? So these are my thoughts for you. If you have no other comments, I think perhaps I should retire, recline to bed. Should I? Or let me give you 2 minutes to say what you have to say. And if not, we can retire. We can end the conversation. We have Annie saying, I am in the US and the economy is going south. Yes, the world economy is moving into a direction in which the elites are the ones who are benefiting while the masses of people are suffering. And this is what we are here saying. And how are we going to defend our interest? But because we're so accustomed to defending our politicians, and when we defend our politicians, we're actually on the side of the global elites or the domestic elites, then that is why they are exploiting us. And we enjoy it. We enjoy it because we keep voting for them. And we keep on supporting and defending their interests. And we shouldn't. Okay? Remember, we said that the economy is divided into two segments in all countries. One for the global elites and the populace. The people's economy is dying. The people's economy. So when people are saying Trump is doing this and Trump is doing that, Trump is doing what benefits the elite economy. And they benefit, they win, right? The people's economy is what is suffering. We're the ones who are going to suffer. Trump's wars, they don't want an end to any war because they send what? Military machines, and it benefits them. In fact, I was reading an article from Politico yesterday, and they said that 75% of the people in the Pentagon are a part of the U.S. or advisors to the U.S. military-industrial complex. 75%. of the military guys who work there in the US Pentagon. It means, therefore, that they want war. So when we're saying, oh, is Trump winning or Trump losing? Trump is not losing because Trump wants war. Because he wants, and US wants a war economy. The Pentagon wants a war economy because that is how they make money from the illegal trafficking of their firearms and other things, and people too. Okay? So it's an economic, it's a disaster. We call it disaster capitalism. Disaster capitalism that is $1 billion industry, maybe $1 trillion industry, if you will. All right? So this is what we are here to say. What will Trinidadians do? Will they wait on Kamala? Or will they wait on the next PNM to do what they cannot do? Now, is it DAGM is saying, is it intellectually honesty to generalize on the basis of a relative's behavior? What are you saying here? What do you mean by that? Is it intellectually dishonest or honesty to generalize on the basis of a relative's behavior? Whose relative are you talking about? Yeah, could you explain what is the honesty or the lack of honesty that was pronounced in our conversation? I don't know if it's my conversation or it's a conversation coming from the chat. Could you explain? Could you expound on that for us? DAGM. Yeah. So this is what we're saying here, that the military-industrial complex and the elite and their elite people are the ones who are causing desperation for us, and they're benefiting from the chaos that they are generating and inducing in the world. Now, Annie's saying she's talking about my comment. Oh, she's okay. I see what you're saying. But oh, you're talking about. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, you are right though, Annie, in what you said in terms of lots of our young men, and particularly Black young men, do not want to be educated. That is a reality. It's not only in Trinidad, it's also in Jamaica. Most of the graduates and the student population at the University of the West Indies, and I'm sure it's also in St. Augustine Mona campus, but certainly on the Mona campus in Kingston, are women. Many of the men are no longer interested in education, and many of them are Black men. So it is true. What the conversation was, why, as I was asking Annie, why is that happening? Why is it just among Black men and not so much? It's also demonstrated at all ethnic groups, I understand, including white people, but not at the alarming rate as we're seeing among Blacks. Black males in particular. Why are we lagging behind? Why is it that we are more, this sort of thug, where we want to be thugs, right? And it's a fact that Black women, including in the United States, cannot find decent Black men to marry to, right? So they end up marrying to other ethnic groups. It's a problem. So that is a reality. But we're not here now to cast blame on Black males and say because we're worthless, but we're asking the question, why? And we're trying to come up with a valid reason for why that is happening. Okay? Yeah. Any other comment? Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, and you make sure you like the video before you leave, and share the video with as many people on the platform. So long. Take it easy.